Okay, folks, let's go ahead and get started with our final portion, our luncheon portion of the program. For those of you who've been with us all day, I hope you've enjoyed this morning's presentations. I know we've had a few clunky technical issues, but I think we are back online. For those of you who are just joining us, tuning in now, thank you for joining us. I would like to remind everyone that if you have questions for Debbie, please type them in the session Q&A, and we'll get to as many of those questions as possible after her presentation. And I did want to mention once again, please visit our exhibitors and RSVP for their live demonstrations. We have hands-up communications with a session after this is over with, and Van Meter actually has two sessions, one on robots and one on the guided workforce after this as well. So please visit their exhibition booths and RSVP. We're very fortunate to have the luncheon program today sponsored by Van Meter. Ready to better leverage your people, processes, and technology in your manufacturing business? Visit vanmeterinc.com/transform to learn how to reinvent your business to overcome modern manufacturing challenges. We're very fortunate to have Jeff Spadaro, the Vice President of Automation at Van Meter, here to introduce our final speaker. Jeff, please come on up.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here today. Van Meter is happy to help sponsor this great event that you and your team put on every year. And it's my pleasure to introduce today's luncheon keynote speaker, Debi Durham. Debi Durham is a longtime economic and community development professional who serves as the director of the Iowa Economic Development Authority and the Iowa Finance Authority. She was named to these positions by Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds in January of 2019. Ms. Durham was first appointed to lead IEDA in 2011. During her 8-year tenure, she has turned the agency into a successful private and public partnership, landed billion-dollar economic development projects for Iowa, and worked tirelessly on expanding trade and investment opportunities for the state. She prides herself on building coalitions, supporting new ventures, and strengthening the state's industries and communities. To that end, she is here today to talk about the state's economic development incentives, manufacturer survey, and manufacturing revolution. Welcome, Debbie, and thank you for being here today. The floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Jeff. You know, Van Meter is one of my favorite companies. I mean, great example of how ESOPs really work, and we love promoting that. So thank you for that. Well, first of all, good afternoon and happy Manufacturing Day, and it's a great day to celebrate manufacturing. I would tell you in Iowa, we do that every day, celebrate manufacturing, and I'm going to show you why with our presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at a really macro level and talk about how we approach growth at IEDA and now combined with the Iowa Finance Authority. And then I'm going to really talk about this fourth industrial revolution and what's coming on the horizon, or at least give you a sneak peek of what's coming, because I can't tell you everything. What a great lineup of speakers, by the way. I'm a big fan of Ernie. I wish I would have heard him, but I guess I can play it back in the car on the way home. I am not driving, by the way, so that will be perfectly safe to do so. So how we approach growth at IEDA is we take a very holistic approach, right? It is about building a business climate in which our businesses can grow and prosper. So that is all about taxation and regulatory environment. It's also about building communities in which people want to live, and it's all about investing in our people, right? And it's building these communities, investing in our people, and an agenda in which they can thrive. And that's how we approach growth in the state of Iowa and have been doing now for over a decade. The other thing is we play to who we are, and who are we in Iowa? Well, we are advanced manufacturing, which we're going to talk about a lot today because that's the theme of our talk, biosciences, finance, and insurance. And I also show information technology, which you can actually, if you think about that, that's that thread that weaves through all of these verticals, which happen to be very mature, they're very deep. It's really, you could almost interchange that with innovation, right? What are we doing within these traded clusters that is allowing us to continue to grow wealth? And I am all about a wealth creating agenda. I don't believe all growth is good growth. I don't believe all jobs are good jobs. At the state, we're really focusing on those jobs that raise the standard of living for Iowans and create wealth. And then the newest sector that we've been working on, and that's really key to this corridor in particular, is this education technology piece, right? If you think about it, we have the home of ACT, McGraw-Hill, Pearson, legacy companies in this space, but there's a tremendous amount of startup that's happening here as well. And it's really all about propping up these sectors of how we approach growth. I really like to hear the last speaker, the things he was talking about workforce development and skill sets, because this is all this about continually learning and lifelong learning. So here's just a slide to kind of tell you how important these sectors are to us. I'm going to show you a GDP slide later on, and I just got literally this morning what our second quarter GDP was for the state. And part of the reason that it was better than most Midwest states, quite frankly, was because of this space right here. This space actually kept it up, kept it going. Huge benefit for us. The bioscience space, and there's a lot of manufacturing woven within this space as well. This is probably our deepest platform in the sense it's everything from biofuels, ethanol, biodiesel, you know, we pretty well own that space, but it's all the way to the other end at biomedical devices and nano vaccines and everything in between. And we'll talk about some opportunities, and particularly in this space that also tie to manufacturing, that I believe we have seen during this COVID pandemic about opportunities for Iowa to scale going forward. But this is who we are in Iowa. We are a manufacturing state. It is our largest gross state product. So I want to show you some statistics. Durable goods. The thing I love about manufacturing, because for every manufacturing job, there's at least 5 jobs that will go around, surround that, if you will, right? A benefit within the community. So if you think in the durable goods space, which is a large part of our economy, 7.44 is the multiplier there. And then when you look at others as non-durable, it's 5.14. So that's why manufacturing is so important to us from a policy point of view. Also, the wages in this sector are higher, and we're going to talk about what that looks like going forward. The other thing that's so significant about the manufacturing space is the amount of research that's done. And I always like to not only benchmark us against other Midwest states we compete with, but it's also good to know how we stand nationally in this. And as you see, so much of the R&D is happening in this space, which is critical as we are in the midst of this industrial fourth revolution. Right? The other thing is obviously total compensation. So much of the wealth that is created in our economy comes from manufacturing. The other thing is I think it's interesting is, yes, we feed the world, right? Not only do we grow the livestock and the commodities, but we also process so much of it in our state. It's that whole value chain, supply chain, economic development strategy. And of course, you all are right here in the heart of the aviation with, of course, Collins and so many of our surrounding supply chain people that are helping, and such as Intolerance, who happens to be here, actually in real audience. It'd be nice to have more people here. I look forward to that day. And these are just some projects I put up here, some logos that you all recognize that we have actually worked with in partnership with your local leaders, right? Both your community leaders and your economic development organizations, as we've seen some really nice continued expansions. And it would be remiss of me not to say, at the very hallmark of our economic development strategy, take care of your own backyard first, right? It's always fun to, you know, people love the headlines of some new company that comes, but most of our growth, I think the last time I checked, 84% of the growth that we have in our economy comes from existing companies right here that continue to grow. And so obviously when Collins, made that, when, Rockwell and Collins merged, and what was that going to look like with the corridor? And when obviously they were told that they had to divest, what's going to happen? And so we, in partnership with your locals, got on the phone immediately and said, we want the opportunity to compete for that business. And of course, you just saw not too long ago that BAE is actually going to build that brand new facility here. Tom reached out to me after it was over, and it went to the board, and I have to say, they are a first-class company. We are not only glad to have them in the state, you should be glad to welcome them as a manufacturer here in your community. They're all about community engagement, giving back. Incredible company to work with. So Tom called me after and he said, Debbie, I have to tell you, working with your state and the community, it was so easy because you were accommodating, you were responsive, you were creative in your responses. We knew you wanted us here. He said, unlike other states that we're working with, we can sometimes not get a phone call. So just think about that. But that was how we approach growth, that we understand it is the businesses here. We also understand that if we don't have policies in place in which our businesses can prosper as a state and local, that businesses move with their feet. So we have to be competitive, and we constantly need to challenge ourselves to be more competitive. All right, so now I'm going to shift, and I want to talk to you about the trends that are facing us as a state, and I would say as a nation, and how we navigate these trends, how we prepare for these and strategize for these will determine what our future looks like. It is about diversity. It is about sustainability. It's about automation. And of course, hearing all the stuff Van Meter's doing with this, and so many of our manufacturers are doing already. It's about infrastructure investment. And I'm going to take a really narrow focus about infrastructure because it's so big, right, today. And then we're going to talk about uncertainty and of course, if there's a word for 2020, I think the word is pivot, right? On any given day, we have had to pause and pivot direction because of something that has happened. And you as a corridor have understood that better than many. So let's talk about why these things are important and why I think they're things we need to focus on. Iowa has an aging, very slow population growth. So yes, we're birthing more babies, right? But that's a longer term proposition. It's still very growth. But if you look at 44% of Iowa's population growth in this almost 10-year period of time came from immigration, right? So we do need a comprehensive immigration policy. And Iowa's non-white population has increased by 32% during that same timeline, right? But we know nationally, there's 10,000 baby boomers that are exiting our workforce every day. I will tell you, I don't know if you see this in your plant floors, I can tell you at the state that we have double-digit number of people that are retiring, that had qualified for retiring, that hadn't planned on doing it this year, that are now doing it because of COVID, right? So we're seeing that. Now, this is national, but if you related that down, it's about 100 people a day in Iowa that's going to be exiting our workforce across all sectors. All right? Now, this is what's interesting, right? We have, going into COVID, there were a few things holding back our economy. We didn't have enough people, right? We had a population problem. So on any given day on IWD, that was one point in time on workforce development, we had 60,000 opening, we had 42,800 people, right? And again, not understanding some of those are obviously not even qualified for those openings. Now, a time, what a difference a day makes, but even at that, right, this is temporary and we know it. We still have a population problem in Iowa. The other thing with women, think about that. I so appreciate all the stuff that Iowa Lead Change does for women in the state and the EPIC challenge. Because, when you look at the statistics of Iowa, yet we still have this huge pay gap with women, right? We still don't see as many women as we should in C-suites, boards of directors and in the C-suites. We were just talking, Jeff, about Van Meter. I was so pleased to see your announcement when the transition of your CEO happened, and it's a woman that has been with the company. So again, things we need to look at. Yet we know, because data tells us, right, that we need smart teams will do these amazing things if there is diversity on those teams. Sustainability, Huge area of focus. Yeah. So millennials, and you know, they're a growing number, right? In fact, I don't know what the statistic is, but the next presentation, we're going to have it. But I just saw that there is a point in time in the distant future, not distant future, soon future, that they're going to basically outpace baby boomers, right? And they think differently. And we notice that when we're providing them with employment. But they're all about, they want to work with somebody with a social responsibility. We just hired a young man that falls into this, that is actually taking a pay cut to work for us, right? And I had, okay, just curious as to why, right? And he said, because I align with your mission. I'm more about mission than pay. Now, not to say he wants to be paid fairly, but so it is a different workforce that we have, right? They'll pay more for sustainable products. And all CEOs, if you look at these companies that are coming up with these carbon neutral plans and sustainability plans, it is happening. And how are we adjusting to that as a state? So I would tell you sustainability is not only a cost of doing business today, I will tell you it is a huge workforce recruitment issue going forward. Now, one of the great things Iowa has is so much of our portfolio is already renewable. And we have, you know, if you think about it, we really do understand conservation here because we feed the world, but we have to make that more into a business proposition for our state. Automation, it is changing everything. Look at this productivity number. Right? This is actually staggering because we haven't seen that kind of productivity number in manufacturing in a long time, right? What automation's going to do. Look at how many of the things we're doing today that can be replaced by automation. And that's unfortunately where policymakers fixate, which is wrong. What they miss is though, yes, it's changing, but there's 15 million new jobs that are going to be created because of automation, right? Those jobs are going to look different and those skill sets are going to be different. 60%, you know, think about this also in every county. So how do we take this into account as we're planning on state strategies on how to ease this transition? So the question is, if we are not helping, and it's not the Collins and the John Deeres that we need to assist, they're already down this path. It is those small to medium-sized manufacturers that we have to assist because they will truly be left behind if they do not keep up. And before long, those OEMs are going to be putting pressure on the SEMs to do that, right? If they're not already doing it. So infrastructure is going to be a very narrow. I'm going to talk mainly because the two things that were really holding us back before COVID was connectivity, right? And we certainly learned that lesson now. Connectivity and housing. Those were the two infrastructure things that we were struggling with going forward. And we all know that you can live anywhere. I've certainly learned as a director that, you know, I can be more flexible with my team as far as remote learning. I do think we need to be together a lot though. I believe you lose too much. This is not a best practice going forward, but certainly we can be more flexible. And we have learned that you can connect and run the world from anywhere. Yet, here's how we rank broadband, right? Speeds rank. We always talk about broadband, and I would say, you know, like we can check that box. And I'd say, no, we really can't check that box. Because saying you have broadband is not enough. It's like, do you have good schools? Check the box. It's not that you have it. It's at what speed can you move data across the world? And so that's where we're woefully lacking, right? But we still have access issues. And I would tell you, everybody wants to say, oh, that's a rural issue. Not really. You've got some telcos out there that have put fiber to every single home. And I will tell you, the fiber that was buried here, that did not lose their internet service compared to those with some of the legacy companies that lost your internet service for a long time. So I would say this is not just a rural issue. We have problems throughout our entire state on access to broadband. Intermodal, though, is still important. And I do throw this in here because I think what we're doing with the certified sites and the mega site here at Big Cedar is exactly what we need to do to be ready for in position for growth going forward. So let's look at the housing stock. We have a very old housing stock, right? And we have a very low vacancy rate. We also have the situation that, frankly, 20% of the renters or homeowners are basically too depend. I mean, they don't have enough funds. I mean, this is creating, this upside down situation is creating some real, because the housing cost keeps coming up, right? At the same time, and particularly we're seeing that now in the cycle that we're in. And yet we have this huge pent up demand for housing. We had it going into COVID, and we have it even more dramatically now. However, housing is one of those sectors of the economy that we can truly see a V-shaped economy. So let's talk about uncertainty, right? So going into COVID, why one of our manufacturing was so soft, I will tell you going forward, our manufacturing was soft was because I believe a large part of it was workforce. They didn't have the people, right? Secondly, it was these trade agreements because we are so dependent in this manufacturing space, in particularly on exporting. And so if you think about that, but then we saw signs, right? And I have to tell you, I was extremely critical of this administration that we decided to go the way of doing these individual trade agreements, right? But the USMCA is a good trade agreement, and we were able to get Japan and phase one with China and South Korea. And we were starting to, for once, begin to see some real hope going forward with those new trade agreements. But again, of course, we still kept seeing schizophrenic policies coming out about the renewable fuel standard. And, years ago, we were made a promise in Iowa that if we developed this green platform of fuels, that there would be a demand for it. And so we've seen it go back, and when they were giving all those waivers to the small refineries, it was really hurting us. I do think some of the new policies, by executive order at least, that have been done has given us hope that we can resolve some of those issues. And then again, no one can control the weather, right? And so as if we didn't have enough to deal with, we get hit with a Midwest hurricane, right? That nobody paid any attention to nationally for a few days, and it was devastating. And of course, you understand that. You guys were the epicenter of that. And what that did on top of everything else that we're dealing with. And then, we have this black swan event. In my lifetime, and I've been doing economic development ever since I graduated from college many, many years ago, and I've never seen anything like it, right? Who could have ever predicted this? You read about it, right? You could see these, it's like a sci-fi movie, right? Or 1984 or something. It's like, how does this happen? And so we were then, our economy just went, it just free fall. Basically, it was just free fall. And so manufacturing was obviously some that was hit the hardest, is again, as you slowed down production and you had constraints in your supply chain. This is what happened. Now, it's interesting. I did ask because, we have still fared better this is where we were, obviously first quarter, where we ended up being today, which is not on the graph, was 28.2%. So that's where we are in GDP. Now, we fully expect in third quarter, which we will not have the results for until December, that we're going to see this really come up. But what was the sector that really created this dive for us? It was manufacturing goods. Because insurance and finance actually kind of rallied a bit during this, surprisingly, but this was manufacturing that created this. But I do think we're going to see an uptick on that going forward. This is what happened with the unemployment at the same time. Now, of course, this is not updated because just yesterday, I think we got it 7.9% of the feds is where we are federally for unemployment. But let me tell you why policies matter. And let me tell you why I believe that Iowa is going to be looked at past COVID in a completely different light of a place to invest, because we're already getting calls. Because we didn't make decisions like we did not shut down our economy. We kept our manufacturers operating. We kept the supply chain moving. Even though I can tell you, tremendous pressure for Governor Reynolds, but she knew she couldn't do that because we are too dependent upon it. So you look at us right now, so Illinois, for example, which is a economy that took a completely different leadership approach. They're at like 11%. Right? And they've got, when you look at the amount of their restaurants and consumer-facing businesses that quite frankly will never open again, it's double-digit compared to what we estimate is going to happen in the state of Iowa. So yes, we had to navigate that. There was no rule book. There was no playbook. Everything's changed all the time. But we made decisions based on the data we had before us, and we made decisions based on the long-term effect of our economy. So going forward, who knows what's going to happen? So we immediately at the state went into, let's stabilize, right? Let's stabilize. We believe that we've reached that nadir, right? We know that. We're in the process of recovering and climbing out of this. You know, you can see that with the job numbers. You're going to see that with the GDP numbers that are coming out. So that's where we are. But more importantly, based on where we are today and what we've learned, because if we've not learned anything from COVID, what a missed opportunity. So we need to take what we've learned and put that into strategy for growth going forward. And so we looked at, you know, I love this, you know, we have all these shapes of the economy, the newest one being the K shape. You know, of course, we're all praying for that V shape, but it's kind of probably going to be closer to a K because you're going to have certain sectors of our economy that are not going to bounce back as quickly as some. Like I said, housing seems to be doing pretty well, but then we've got other issues there because of the price of materials right now is so high. So what's the opportunity going forward, particularly in manufacturing? Well, Governor Reynolds immediately went to work and said, I need a plan. This is going to be her 2021 State of the State address. I mean, so she brought all of these, it's all private sector led, right? So we as staff and directors and our teams are, you know, providing input to them as far as providing them with information, but this is all private sector led. They're coming up with growth plans in all of these sectors. If you look at the economic growth, of course, we have the biggest group because we touch so many parts of the economy going forward. And I think it's October, middle of October, that you'll be able to see what came from it. And I'm telling you, there are some really transformational things in this plan. Now, so there's things in the plan too that it's just like, just do it, right? We don't need legislation. We don't need money. Of course, we need a portal for business in Iowa through the Department of Revenue. Of course, we need to upgrade our systems. So it's not that kind of stuff. It really is bigger thinking issues. So where's the opportunities through COVID? This is what it's taught us. In the biospace, and this obviously touches manufacturing, is bio-based chemicals, vaccines, immunotherapy, and medical devices. And I'm going to tell you where the corridor is really key, strategically located, and with the University of Iowa to play in some of these spaces. So in the vaccines and immunotherapy, in partnership with Iowa State, if you think about it, Iowa State had the veterinary diagnostic lab, meaning if COVID was an issue for animals, they could have done rapid testing, right? But unfortunately, it didn't affect our animals, right? It affected us. And so the state diagnostic lab wasn't really ready or equipped, and I would say no state lab was, to do the volume of testing that we did. Yet we have a facility that's state of the art at the campus of Iowa State. If we actually just made some investments in that, you could do that where you could run dual platforms. And they were tremendously helpful to the state lab. And so those are investments we need to make going forward. But they're also doing amazing things on nano vaccines about how you can deliver these therapies. And I talked to Governor Reynolds just yesterday, and I said, you know, honestly, I think if we made some small investments in this, you could see a huge takeoff in this going forward, in relationship to COVID and other things. The other things is we own the fuel stream, right? We have to harvest chemicals from that fuel stream. We have to think like a petroleum company and add that value. Only we can do it on a green platform and look for those new molecules in plants and changing. And we have companies right here in your backyard that are doing these incredible, innovative things, right? In this space, huge opportunity. This is highly, very large capital investments in this space. And I will tell you, going into 2020, December, I said to Governor Reynolds when I sat in her office, we're gonna have the biggest economic development year we've ever had. And I'm not saying something because we've had some really big years, big. Our pipeline is full. It's the bulk of it is manufacturing, and we're talking large manufacturing projects. Many of them are investments from existing companies that are looking to these new opportunities, but some of it is new. And those projects are still there. Now, they're not closing right now, but they haven't gone away. So that encourages me. But you're going to see these opportunities for investments. Medical devices, huge play with the University of Iowa. If you think about it, you know, our medical school, they're spawning out all kinds of new innovative ideas. And then when the doctors come up with something, they want to test it, they had no place to do it other than going to Minnesota, right? We built an entire traded cluster, I think, in Minnesota. And so we're saying we set up, the state invested in this prototype studios over at Iowa State, and we're seeing results of it. And they're going to put it actually, if they haven't already, right into the medical school so the doctors can come down there and tinker. You know, we need tinkers. We need people like the maker space that's innovating. And so you're going to be seeing an entire cluster of manufacturing ramped up around this medical devices. Very exciting for us. Manufacturing 4.0. We were working prior to all of this to release a report coming in December that is all about state of manufacturing today and what it looks like tomorrow and how Iowa is going to position itself. It is about thinking differently. Now, this is a huge paradigm shift for our elected officials, I'm going to tell you, right? Because we are always so fixated on any economic development deal. The first question I get, well, how many jobs are there, Debbie? Right? And I'm going to tell you, that's the wrong question. It's not the number of jobs, it's the quality of the jobs, right? Let me tell you how quality these jobs are. Because it is about now investing in our manufacturers, like accelerated depreciation for the supply chain, right? If you're at Collins and all of your sales are outside the state, you don't worry about corporate income tax because you don't pay hardly any, right? Because it's a single factor on sales only in the state. It's a great it's a great incentive. But if you're a supplier to them, you're hit, you know, of course with deductions, but you're hit with one of the highest corporate income tax rates, even with federal deductibility in the country. So we're saying we want to look through corporate income tax, right? So that means if you're supplying to Collins, that you're not taxed on that either, right? Now, we proposed this several years ago, and it got a lot of traction because it's a fairness issue, right? People get that. We want supply chain development because it's lean, green economic development. You cut down your transportation costs. It's that spin-off effect, those 5 to 7 multipliers, but yet, the tax advantage for them are not as high. They're better off selling to somebody outside the state. And so we tried it, and you know what happened? It wasn't that there wasn't a momentum in the legislature. Revenue said, we can't administer this. I don't even know how we would do that. So now, right, fast forward, we have a new Department of Revenue director who actually comes from this part of the state, Mr. Polson, right? And Mr. Polson is investing in the Department of Revenue so that we can do this kind of incentive should it come forward, right? But it's also about retraining workers. We have a great 260E program, but it's all for new employees. We do not have a good retraining program in the state, right? There's very little money in it. And so we have to also, so what we need to do on this, yes, provide incentives for automation. We do need to do that. Incentives to continue to grow our supply chain, but we also need incentives to retrain our existing workers to make sure they can adapt to that. So what are you going to see when this plan comes out in December? You're going to see technology and adoption. You're going to see improved supply chain linkages. We're going to show you a new proposal, excuse me, for training in our state. You're going to see what we're going to do on the manufacturing part as far as fostering more of innovation and startups. And you're going to see this digital infrastructure and sustainable manufacturing model come forth. And it is all coming. It's almost done. It's, again, all industry-led. However, we have people like the community colleges are at the table, the universities are at the table. You know, we have quite the collaborative group that is joining us. It is also, you're going to be seeing coming forth out of the governor's plan, it is all about connectivity. I think we learned with COVID just how unprepared we were, particularly in delivering of education, right? And just the inequities that we have created in that. We also learned though with COVID, we really can do telemedicine, right? Something we know we need to do for a long time. There's not going to be enough doctors out there, particularly in rural Iowa. But there were 3 factors. The consumers didn't like it, doctors weren't crazy about it, and the insurance providers weren't going to pay for it, right? And so that all changed with COVID. People are doing it. I personally like it because I can lie about my weight when I tell him, of course, nothing has changed since COVID, but so yes, so it's important. And then of course, this, in order to run manufacturing 4.0, we always talk about 25 speeds up and down. I'm telling you, that's not, that's like to check the box, right? This is 100 plus up and down. With latency, we're talking about if we could be the state This is a huge capital investment. We have a way to do it. And so that's one of the things you're going to see coming forth in this plan, because we know that that's what we need to do all of these things. So we've always focused on connectivity. It's always been part of the agenda since back in 2011 when I started in both administrations, but now it just kind of put an exclamation mark on it, right? Now it's an imperative. We absolutely have to do it. And I believe, and all states are doing it, but I think we have a plan to get there first. And of course, so these are the things that you're going to start seeing. This will be coming out also. Let's see. And then, so stay tuned. Manufacturing 4.0, it's coming. And you're going to see a lot of conversation about this at the legislative session. So I'm going to stop, and then I have questions. Okay. When you speak with manufacturers about digital transformation, Industry 4.0, what holds them back from moving forward with these initiatives? Great question. And what really moves them forth is just, first of all, not really knowing where to start. I'm going to be really honest, right? Where do we begin on this? And so part of this 4.0 plan that's coming forward is we're going to do a bigger initiative with Cirrus, because I think Cirrus does a great job. But, you know, we need to get them more, we need to do a better survey to help. So you're going to see us propose some grant dollars for small to medium-sized manufacturers, like a matching fund grant dollar. Now, again, all this stuff I'm saying all has to go through a legislative process. So I want to make that very clear. But how hard can it be, right? I mean, really, because it's important to us. Manufacturing is important. But we're going to propose grant dollars to help people along the way. We're also going to be looking at, when we talk about accelerated depreciation, can that extend beyond just hard capital costs like machinery? Can we apply that to some kind of software development? So part of it is people just, they know they need to do it, but they just, they don't know where to start. I will tell you, because we have about every OEM at the table during this. And though they have not put a lot of pressure on the supply chain, that's coming. And so that's the other thing, working in partnership with them. So it's really just starting. And so we're going to help them map that out. Are you in favor of more stimulus? Yes. But targeted stimulus. Let's be very clear about that, right? I think the PPP, first of all, I've done, because, you know, I just had my 60th birthday this year, so, and I've been doing this since college, so that tells you a lot, right? I've never seen, and I've been through a lot of economic cycles, and I remember 9/11, I remember the 08, 09. I even remember my first home. I think it was during the Carter days, and we were, you know, it was like 19 or 20% interest rate. It was crazy, right? So, I mean, I've read through many, many cycles. I've never seen I've never seen money and liquidity hit the Main Street as quickly as it did this time. And I have to give the Treasury, quite frankly, and SBA an incredible amount of, because SBA didn't even have a PPP program going forward. And so they got money out there quickly. So I think we need more PPP, right? And we do need to help those consumer-facing businesses in particular. I also was not in favor of continuing the extra $600 a week in unemployment benefits, right? Because what we saw was a disincentive to work. I believe people still need help, right? I do believe that. And I do believe there's a number, I just thought 600 was too high. And in Iowa, that's proven to be true. Because if you looked at where we were and where we are now, when that stopped, it was almost immediate drop in our unemployment. And we had openings. We even had manufacturers, and I don't blame them, I would have done the same thing, that were basically giving their people enough hours to keep them on the payroll so they didn't leave, but that they could still draw it because they, you know, they didn't want to lose them. And so we need incentives, but we need incentives that don't create that kind. So yes, I'm hoping that they do it, and I hope it's PPP and some assistance. The other area, and this doesn't, well, it does affect you, everything affects you, is the thing that keeps me up at night right now is their eviction and foreclosure numbers, right? Governor Reynolds has been very generous in the CARES Act money. We have 22 million, one of the first states that have actually implemented a plan quickly. And, but what we estimate is coming by the end of the year if we do not get additional funds, and we're hoping that that is also part of the stimulus. We have to keep people in their homes because that's obviously a bigger issue. Talk about, you know, a health issue if we don't want evictions to continue. So, all right, when you've seen evidence of reshoring occurring in Iowa, and if not, to what extent do you see it current? Actually, I do think there's an opportunity to do reshoring, and we're seeing it, but you're gonna see reshoring within our traded clusters, right? I mean, some people, you know, everybody wanted us to go out and, recruit face mask folks, even though with so many of our industries transition, well, we're not going to do that, right? I mean, let's be honest, right? We're talking about building an economy of manufacturing that's very high skilled, very technical, very innovative. There is a huge play for us in the pharmaceutical, nutraceutical space of bringing some of that back. And I do believe there's some opportunity to bring back some supply chain with the manufacturing, but we're going to be very selective on what we go after. And we do have a plan. You talked about growing existing Iowa companies in addition to bringing new ones in. Can you, Iowa company, yes. So basically right now, what we have at Iowa is fully refundable R&D tax credit, one of the best incentives we have, which is important to this space based on the number of R&D. We have a number of tax credits, but they're, the problem with our tax credits, and if you don't have a big liability to the state, they're meaningless to you because you can't transfer them and you can't cash them in. So another thing we're going to be talking to the legislature is that, and then we give you sales tax refund if you're building a building on your construction. But we already have such a strong value proposition for manufacturing. We don't test, we don't tax your machinery and equipment. We don't tax your inputs. You're not taxed on electricity, which some states do. Always people talk about South Dakota, and I say, well, if you're manufacturing, South Dakota is probably not the place if you're using a high energy because they tax your energy. So we don't do any of that. But what I am also going to be proposing to the legislature is we make our investment tax credits refundable. So it's like cash, but yet it's tied to a contract. So therefore you have to hit certain milestones. And that way we don't need as many for one, because because they're actually more meaningful. The second piece is I would like to see in the manufacturing space that you don't even have to come to us to get exemption on your sales tax of your construction. I think it should just be, if you're a manufacturer and you're building a production facility, you should not be taxed. It shouldn't be a case that you're coming to us and then we have to refund it back to you. So again, those are all things that are on the table. What the ultimate plan looks like, I can't tell you right now, but I can tell you everything we're looking at. So does that answer the questions? All right, good. Thank you.